Welcome back to the Football Fitness Federation podcast. This is episode 104. I am delighted today to be joined by Ruud van El, the head of sports science and analytics at PSV Eindhoven. Ruud, thank you very much for coming on.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you on, mate. We often reach out to our listeners and ask about potential guests or topics. And one that comes up a lot of the time is obviously a lot of our listeners are UK based. So a lot of people often say, can we hear from coaches in Europe and in different leagues? So it's great to have you on. It'd be great to dive in some insight into what you do over in the Dutch league. So yeah, thank you very much for giving up your time.
Happy to be here, man. Looking forward.
Brilliant. So do you want to kick us off, Ruud? Just take us through your career. Just give us a little update on your career, where you've been, what you've been up to.
Yeah, sure. So I started out studying health sciences and biology of human performance in Maastricht University in the south of Holland. And as my bachelor graduation project, I looked into the functional movement screen a little bit. So that was in, I think, 2011, 12, that period. FMS was a big thing, especially in the States, and there were some discussions in Holland about the validity and how it should be used in football. So we did a little study on that on a pretty big group for a year, and PSV was one of the clubs that was back then involved in that project. So I ended up coming here a couple times, just not that much. The connections were laid, and then Luc van Acht, my boss, or my former boss actually, he asked me to do my master's project here as well. So in my master's, I did a study on carbohydrate supplementation. It was in 2012, 13. And after that, started working part-time for the club. First in the academy, partly SNC, partly sports science. The little combined role pretty much everyone started out with, I guess. Doing way too much stuff and way too little time. So I think my first contract was about 8 hours, and I worked 3 or 4 days a week. And then gradually over the years, started growing more into the sports science role. The SNC didn't fit me that much, so I became the first full-time sports scientist for the academy. And in 2015, I moved to the first team. So I've been with the first team for, I think this is my 5th or 6th season now. And actually this year, we changed our performance department a little bit in the organizational structure. And since this year, I'm the head of sports science and analytics. So a little bit more of an coordinating role as well, also into the academy. And that's where I am right now. Yeah. So it's been, I've been with the club already for almost 10 years, I think, if you also include the internship.
Wow, it's a fair amount of time, isn't it? So you must have seen a decent change in that time.
Yeah, definitely. So currently, especially in the academy, we invested, for Dutch levels, we invested quite a bit. So if you look at our academy building right now, but also the whole staff, I think in my first year we were there with 15 people at lunch, and right now it's sometimes 150 people lunching there in the academy. So the organization grew amazingly, and luckily we also see the benefits of that with guys really joining the first team, and especially in the last 2 or 3 years. Also selling a few for quite good amounts, so that's what we're really happy with. And of course, right now it's my 3rd or 4th head coach for the first team, so we're starting to get a little bit experienced in that as well. So it's been a nice ride for sure.
Yeah, definitely. No, that's great. And just before we started recording, I had a little like you do, just went on my phone on Twitter, and I saw you retweet a tweet from the Dutch league. They put out some information that I'm guessing you saw coming about the clubs gathering data together for this season. So do you want to just give us a little update on that? Because I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, it's actually a project that's been running for a couple of years already, but we were quite late as a league to start gathering tracking data from a league perspective. So until 2 years ago, a few clubs did it by themselves. So it was Vitesse, Ajax and us doing it by ourselves, but there was no league solution. And a year or I think 3 years ago, we started coming together with those clubs and say, okay, it's pretty crazy that we do it all by ourselves, but there's no solution for the whole country. And back then we started with first just gathering the data, so just tracking data from Cairo. All the clubs were involved in that, and actually this year We upgraded that project a little bit. So what happened this year is that we're also going to get all the tactical videos in every stadium. So there will be fixed panoramic view cameras in all the stadiums from next week on. And all the data will be shared through a platform from Sky Sports and Emotio, who are doing that together. And yeah, I think that's a big plus for the Dutch league to get that going, because I think we were a little bit behind. If you look at pretty much all the leagues in Europe did already have some kind of system in place, and right now it seems that we are pretty much at the same level and competing on that again. So that's been really good, and I'm really happy that all the clubs decided to go for it together.
And how do you see that influencing your practice, Ruud? I know it's hard to say before you're able to gather all the information, but how do you see things changing?
Data-wise, we already get the data for 2 or 3 years, 2 years, sorry, for the league. So that's been, the biggest thing was before that we gathered everything ourselves. So myself and a few colleagues were traveling to all the games, putting up mobile tracking kits in every stadium. It saves us so much time that it's now pre-installed. It's been taken care of by Karen Higo. It's controlled, it's shared in a proper way, and we get all the data instead of only our own games. So that influence already has been huge. And the addition right now with also gathering the tactical feed, for the video analysis guys, is that they don't have to gather all the videos from colleagues or the clubs that they have. They just now log into one platform and they can see all the league games for all the teams, which is a big plus, I think. And especially for Holland, because we also have quite a few pretty small stadiums. The camera platforms are often also really low, and with the fixed installations right now, they could pick the highest point in the stadium, which you normally can't reach with a cameraman. So I think that the image quality and the view you have on the pitch might even improve a little bit. So I think that's a big plus of the steps we are taking right now as a league. So that's been really beneficial already.
Yeah, that saving of time is absolutely crucial, isn't it? Because I imagine that's going to free up so much time for you to be focusing your energy elsewhere and progressing things on. Yeah,
even we don't travel that far, of course, in Holland. Our furthest away game is just a 3-hour drive, but still, if you want to be there, you are there often 3 hours before the game, hour and a half after, then doing the analysis, getting home. An away game would take you 10 to 15, 16 hours, and time is just completely saved for other things right now. So that's huge for sure, and especially if you play 2 or 3 games a week.
Yeah, brilliant. And I was going to ask as well, because I know you touched on it a little bit there, but what do you see as some recent advances in analytics or data analytics that have occurred recently?
Yeah, I think the availability of data is a really big thing. So it's getting easier and easier to get information. I think the availability of tracking data is still, I won't say an issue, but you get it from your own league, but we're still not able to get it from other leagues, of course. I think that will be one of the things for the next few years. And it's just getting easier and easier to combine data streams, to get good insights from them. So I think it's not in data quality, but mainly in the way we handle the data. And I think we are still a pretty small club on our, if you look at the amount of staff that we have, but the steps we are making are already pretty impressive if you look at what happened a few years ago. So I think it's mainly the way that we handle the data instead of the availability that's been the biggest thing in the last few years. And the fact also that we get a lot faster in doing the right thing. So automating either your analysis or the collection or the way you present things to the rest of the staff, that's also been advantages that we really made. And I think speed in football is one of the biggest things that we need, because I think it's one of the things Philippe Cocu, one of our former head coaches, always said, like, if you want to give me some information back on our, let's say, Sunday afternoon game, and we have a game in the Champions League on Wednesday night, for me Monday morning is the only window that we have to get something back to the group. Like Monday afternoon we'll be probably off, Tuesday we'll be working towards the Wednesday game, so we have a window of, let's say, Sunday 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock until Monday morning 8 o'clock to get something ready. And if it takes you more than that to get the information, get your data scrubbed or delivered in a good way, analyze it and decide what you want to give back to the team, it just takes too long. So speed is definitely really important, and that's something that's definitely been something we've been focusing on, and that really helps in the way we use different data streams within the club.
I think that's a great point, because we've spoke a lot before about presenting data and not just having a load of jargon there, like simplifying it and giving whoever you're speaking to sort of thinking about their language and ways they think. But also, you've just mentioned a great point there in terms of the timing. If you turn around to that manager the day before a midweek game and start presenting on the Sunday, it's not in their mind at that point, is it? There's a lot of other things going on.
Yeah, it makes no sense at all anymore. It's just as soon as you have a window of, I think, 12 to 14 hours, and I think it counts for a lot of, not only your, let's say, your event data, your tracking data for the game, but also I think if it goes about testing data or your tracking data from the training, the timing windows are so small, so the faster you can be, the better. And I think that's something that, I think we as a club are really focusing on, but I think you see it more and more in the whole industry, and also just focusing on the things that really matter for, let's say, a specific coach or a specific group of players or physical trainers, whatever. It seems like we are doing less and less, but doing it in a really proper and good way. So in the beginning, let's say 5, 6, 7 years ago, we tried to gather as much as possible, all the information we could get. And then it's really hard to get to the right things. And slowly you start focusing more and more on specifics and doing those really, really well. So I think that's really important in a football organization.
And that was a question I was going to ask you, in terms of there's so many data sets out there and all this sort of noise. Obviously, a lot of it's good, but how do we find the data that we require and that can be impactful on our performance or our preparation?
Yeah, I think it's a bit two-sided for me. I think one is trying to get into the mind of the coach and the coaching staff that you have, and giving them the information they will really use and they will really need. Because if you feedback them something that doesn't fit the way they look at football or the way they want to train, they will never use it, and it just doesn't make sense. That would be just giving them data for the case of giving it, not really for using it. So that's one. And the other thing is, and I think that's, in my opinion, one of the critiques I often have to our own profession, is that we are often not really taking care of the quality of our data. So I'm sometimes questioning the quality of the systems that we use, and are they really validated, and how good are they, and how comparable are they? And I often feel that that's something we tend to forget as a sports science community, and I think we try to be really careful with it as a club, but it's something that I think you should be really careful about. Okay, what's going to happen when you combine different data streams from different providers? How accurate are they? How valid are they? And how interchangeable are they? And that's something that we try to do really well, but it's a really dangerous thing, in my opinion, to not do that in a good way.
And then obviously becomes, which we've just touched on a little bit, is presenting that data as well and making it understandable for a variety of different people, not just a head coach or a manager, but you might be speaking to people in finance, at the financial side of the club, or whoever. So what would be your advice, Ruud, on, because we're talking to the listeners on the podcast, we might have some academy sports scientists, strength conditioning coaches, we might have some first team, we might even have some part-time coaches as well. So obviously the data will be very different throughout those clubs and those levels. But what would your advice be on presenting any data back?
Yeah, what we currently do is we use Tableau as our data platform to share the data with all the different stakeholders pretty much. And I think uniformity is one of the biggest things. So for instance, what we do is, if you look at our physical data, for instance, we color code everything in every single report in the same way. So if we see red, coaches know it's about high intensity, distance or meters. If it's blue, it's about distance. If it's green, it's about the number of sprints or actions. So uniformity in the way that you present is, I think, really important. As I think I found out, football coaches don't really like to read legends and stuff. So they look at pictures, but they don't really read what's there. So having them using the same consistency in the way you present things is really important, in my opinion, and not putting in too much information. Just get to the key as soon as possible, and don't let them scroll to 85 pages of a training or a match report, which that doesn't make any sense for me. So trying to cut to the chase is probably really important. and uniformity in it. Yeah. And I think you can use different systems. We have Tableau, which has been fantastic for us, but that could also be just a simple Excel or PowerPoint presentation. That I think that doesn't really matter in the way when you get, I think, towards a more professional situation. Automating stuff really helps, especially because of the little time that you have. So going towards a more solid solution would definitely benefit it. But yeah, other systems can also really work well if you use them in the right way.
Yeah, I think that's a great point for the coaches that are working in any sort of semi-professional part-time clubs as well, is that there's still things that they can do, isn't there? As much as they might not have access to the systems that you guys have or the Premier League has, then there's still things that they can do and still things that they can track and data that they can present, but they still need to take consideration to exactly what you said when presenting back.
Yeah, if you do it consistently and doing it in a proper way and don't focus on too many things, it's definitely possible in let's say a semi-professional or an amateur situation for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And then the other thing I wanted to touch on, Ruud, was tying data sets or data analytics into a game model. So many teams will play many different ways, and I'm sure in your time you don't have to go into specifics on the club, obviously, but in your time under different managers, I'm sure they had different approaches, and everyone listening, everyone's manager or coach will be slightly different, I'm sure. So how do we, I know a bit of a broad question, but how do we highlight the data sets that we're going to use to tie in with the game model and then have the biggest impact on our performance?
Yeah, I think it's a question, and it's not an easy one, because I think it's also really depending on the staff that you're working with and the people that you're working with. But what we try to do is getting the way the coaches look at the game is the first thing. So for instance, right now with our new staff, we try to get as much into their heads as possible and try to get out what they want to see from us. And of course, there's already a lot in place based on the previous coaches and people that we had within the club, but trying to do the stuff they want to see, I think is the biggest thing. My background is a little bit more on the physical side, so that's probably what I'm focused on the most. What you see there is that the differences are often not huge. So it's often like a tiny thing they want to see differently, some specific thing in a report that you change around, but the basics are still there. And I think if I look back at the coaches that we had, the way we gather and analyze our data didn't really change that much. We still gather all the tracking data, we still get all the event data from the games, the way we save it into our databases and we store it, that didn't really change. The only things that do change is the way we maybe present them or show them in a report. And I think having consistency on that back end, so not having to change your whole process of your gathering and analysis, really helps if a new staff comes along, and then it will be about some details you change in a report or the way you want to show it, which really helps also in getting a staff up to speed. Because I think if you need months and months before a new staff is ready to start using your data, then you're already so far behind. So I think trying, of course, to get them to buy in also into the club's philosophy helps, and then changing the things they really want to see in a quick manner. That's I think key in the way when you change coaches or change playing styles or whatever.
Yeah, and that brings up another topic, is understanding other people's roles and again tying in the communication between coaching staff and people that are going to make decisions, doesn't it? So in terms of that, like what's your experience on that? Because I always find it fascinating speaking to coaches on building relationships and communicating well with other staff members, because you see some clubs doing it really well and things work really fluidly, and then there'll be others that don't work so well. So what's your opinion on that? Yeah,
I think it's one of the challenges that you have, especially when a staff grows and there's more people involved around the team, is how do you communicate with all the different stakeholders, and especially I think in the overlaying part of where the coaching staff, the medical staff, the performance staff, they all come together. There's always challenges there, and I think that's not easy for a club, which club. But I think and the way we try to do it right now is we actually this year we changed the organization of our performance staff a little bit. So we are currently not working with like an overviewing performance manager anymore. So we defined 5 areas of performance within our performance staff, which are strength conditioning, sports science analytics, video analysis, nutrition, and performance behavior. And the people that are responsible for those areas, they need really close communication lines, also with the medical staff, of course, and with the coaching staff. And what we did is we set up different meeting structures. So let's say there's an analytics meeting with certain people involved. There's a rehab meeting where certain people from different staffs are involved. And that's the way we try to make sure that everybody knows what they need to know before the day starts, or the training or the game starts. And so far, I think that's been really helpful. And of course, there's always problems in starting that up, and people sometimes miss information or get too much information. But when you work in such a fast-paced environment with so many people, sharing the information the right way will always be a tricky thing. And I think as a club, you should always look into how can we improve that year after year after year. And I think we've made some good steps in it, but it's definitely a challenge for sure.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And then I wanted to ask Ruud as well in terms of going forward, because I always like to ask sports scientists about what their opinions are on the future of sports science, data analytics, because it's really fascinating, isn't it? How far, and I'm sure you've seen it in the 10 years that you've been at the club, how far things can progress in such a small amount of time. So if you're looking at maybe 2, 5, 10 years down the line, what's your opinion? Where do you see things going in terms of data?
I think broader availability of data will be a big thing. So tracking information from multiple leagues, broadcast tracking. So can we get tracking data from, let's say, the second league somewhere in South America from a broadcast perspective? Would be, especially for scouts, would be really interesting. And there are some companies already working on that and having some promising results. So I think that's going to be a big thing. On a more detailed level, maybe even stuff like limb tracking. Let's say VR solutions that are already in place, they still really, in my opinion, lack some of the information that you use as a football player in limb position and head position. What are people looking at? So if we can get to that next level, that would definitely be a big thing. I think from a perspective, we are still using the Emotion system as our tracking system, which has been fantastic in accuracy, but it's still pretty bulky. So it's a bit bigger than the GPS units that we know. So I think integrating your tracking device, whether it's a GPS or an LPM device, doesn't really matter, but integrating that into your clothing will be definitely one of the big steps in the next few years. So somewhere in your shirt or in your shorts, that you don't really have to wear a device anymore. That will also be I think be a good thing, because players still they wear it without a problem, but if we can get it out of the way, that would be a good step as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. And the other thing I was going to ask before, Ruud, when we talked about sort of part-time and S&C or sports scientist, is if you had a blank canvas going into a club, especially a club in that sort of part-time role, what would be your focus on settings? If you had a little bit of money, let's say, some systems, where would you prioritize?
From let's say a semi-professional perspective?
Yeah, I think so. I'm just trying to think about the listeners. I know a lot of listeners will be in that position.
In my opinion, I'm not really sure about, but if I look at that level in Holland, it will be first about training really well. So I wouldn't really focus on getting all kinds of fancy measuring equipment, but having good training facilities, good training equipment, and a good training staff, that will definitely be my first step. We can measure everything we want, but if we don't train properly and we don't have the right tools to do that, that will be my number one for sure. And then going into the more fancy stuff later. And I think if you look at like the more real sports science stuff, if you have some speed gates, a good jumping mat, or maybe even a force plate, and some heart rate equipment, you already can do quite a bit of work, especially if you have to do it in a part-time role. So if it goes towards more of a real sports science stuff, I would consider doing that. But first, do the basics right and get good training materials and a good staff and to really work. Yeah.
And I know you've already touched on it and named a few of the companies even that you guys use, and you don't have to answer this if you don't want, but is there any others that you would like to sort of push and say that you've used their system and that you're it's something you're going to continue to use and you will push others to?
Yeah, now for us, our tracking provider for our training sessions has been Emotio, which for me has been fantastic. I think the quality, especially the quality of their tracking data, is pretty much the best there is around. Still a bit bulky. That's a big disadvantage, and it's fixed on the field, so it's not mobile like a GPS system. But if you look at, I think at the level we are working on, we want the most accuracy that we can get, and we get it from that system. So we are really happy with that. And also in the league, the current ego data has been really good for us. So those are the things that we definitely plan on continuing using. And I think on the analysis side for us, using Tableau has been a really big thing. In the amount of time that it saved us, and I think the way the reports are looking right now, the way the consistency that we have throughout the club, from first team to the academy, even now to the commercial side of the club and the stadium, who are also starting to use Tableau since this year. So those are, I think, from my perspective, are the three companies that are currently have the biggest influence within our club. No,
that's awesome. And then I was just going to take it full circle and take it back to something that you mentioned at the start when you said about working in S&C in sports science and being in control of a number of different responsibilities. And I think you said about having an 8-hour contract and across a number of different days, which I'm sure many people will be able to relate to. But what was your, what made the decision to go down the sports science and data route rather than down the S&C? And I should have asked this at the start, but I just thought it would be good to get your
sure.
point of view.
Partly personal interest. I think I really like the IT and the data part as well. So that's also personal preference, I guess. But also just quality. I think I'm a better scientist than I am an S&C coach. I really enjoyed working individually with guys. So I think the rehab stuff and the individual programs was something I really like. But standing in front of a group of 25 football players is something that I'm not the best at. So I think I saw quite soon that my colleagues were doing that job a lot better. So it's also a decision that's based on the stuff that's I think close to you and what you're better at. So it was a really easy decision for me to move on into that direction.
Yeah. And I'm sure the reason why I asked is I'm sure there'll be people that can relate to your answer on that as well. So no, thanks for being open with that. Ruud, if we go into some quick fire now, so some quick fire questions, and I say quick fire, but they don't have to be that quick. But I wanted to ask just a few questions in terms of just to get a little insight into you. So first of all, and you can have a number for this, you don't have to stick to one, but name some people that have been the biggest influences on your career so far.
Within the club, definitely Luc van Aert. Our former performance manager is now our innovation manager. I've been working under him, pretty much for the last decade. Really a big mentor. Luc is, I think, especially one of the most experienced sports scientists there is. He's been with this club for over 30 years, but also worked in athletics. Did multiple Olympic games. Was with the Dutch national team on 3 big tournaments. So really experienced guy. So from my perspective, he's definitely one of the big ones. Outside the club, I would definitely say also Dave Tenney, who's been in the NBA. I met him when he was working for the Seattle Sounders, and he's going back to the MLS now, going into Austin. So Dave has definitely been an inspiration for me, and especially in the way he organized things at Seattle and how he thinks about performance as a whole. So those two would be first I would think of.
Brilliant. Yeah, it's always great to see, isn't it, working in football, to see those practitioners step back into the game. When I saw that announcement, I think it was yesterday, it's always great, isn't it? Because when I know they're still involved in sport as a whole and performance as a whole, and there'll still be things that they'll put out that relate to what you do. But when they return back to your sport, it's always great, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
And then the next one I wanted to ask is, what's your biggest strength as a coach?
That's a good question. I think I'm really able to to keep, let's say, 100 balls in the air all the time. So there's always so much going on within a professional environment, and I think the ability to make sure that you get the right things out of it quickly, and also say, okay, this is what we drop and we forget about for now. I think that's something I'm really good at. So that would, I think, be one of the strengths I have as a coach. Yeah.
Brilliant. No, that's great. And then the next one is, I think this ties quite nicely into sort of lockdown, and I'm sure you did a lot of reading, a lot of research like everyone did in this time. But what's the best bit of CPD that you've done recently, like whether it be a webinar or a presentation that you've watched?
That's a good one. You mean, let's say the last half year?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
That's a good one. Yeah, actually, I started doing some courses for myself, which you never have the time for. I started to freshen up my Python skills, which was really helpful. I'm not doing that much coding myself, but still having the skills and knowing what the guys that are working with us are doing is really helpful. So that would be the most beneficial that I did. For me, if I look at conferences, I think and those are not digital ones, but the two that I always try to go to are the one from Barcelona. So the Technology Week in Barcelona has been, in my opinion, fantastic with the people that are coming there, and also the Seattle Sounders Sports Science Weekend has been a really, really good thing for me to visit. And I was lucky enough to be there twice, so those would be the two things I would want to mention.
Yeah, brilliant. No, it's something that I added in because I knew that a lot of people are going to have been doing that little bit extra CPD recently, so it's good to get some specifics on it. And then the final two are basically the same question, but for two different people. So what do you think is the most important trait as a coach? Or one of the most important traits of a coach?
That's a good one. I think in a role, if you are in a, let's say, in an S&C role, or in a sports science role, whatever performance job you have, I think knowing your place within it is really important. So, of course, there's times that you really have to step up and stand for your work, but also knowing when not to do that and having a feeling for that is a really big thing. So, in my opinion, we are really working within the club as a supportive part of the staff. So let's say everything is focused around the player group and the first layer of coaches around that. So we should be in that second layer around that, being really supportive, but knowing, okay, this is the period that I have to and I can step up, but also knowing, okay, this is not the time for me to dive into this, or this is not really my subject, so I stay out of it. So having a little bit of a feeling of that, I think that's really helpful in navigating your way through a club. And I'm not sure if it's really something you can learn, but it's something you do have a feeling for, and I think you know that quick enough on when to step up, when not to, and really finding your place within the whole player and staff group within the team.
Yeah, great point. And then the same question. So, most important trait, but from a player.
I think, like, if we look at our academy right now and the guys that are coming through, I think, like, all those guys are really talented. There's no way, I think, in professional football anymore that you end up at a, let's say, an under-19 team or an under-18 team at a pro club in Western Europe. And I think as a player, being able to really use all the resources that are available for you, there is so much right now in strength conditioning, in sports science, in nutrition, like everything is ready for you, and trying to get most out of that as a player, I think that's been really beneficial if you are able to really suck it all up and putting that into your own perspective. And I think it's different for every player, of course. Some guys want more guidance or want more help, but having the ability to use all the resources available is definitely, I think, a big plus for young guys right now.
Brilliant. No, that's awesome. Ruud, I think we covered everything that we said we were going to get through there. So no, unless there's anything else that you wanted to touch on, I think we got through it all. So thank you very much for coming on.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me. It was great to be here.
No, I appreciate you giving up your time, and we'll stay in touch, and all the best for the season ahead.
Thanks, man.
Oh, just Ruud, finally, actually, can you just give your, is there anywhere that people can ask questions and reach out?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Twitter, LinkedIn. I'll send you my details so you can put them in, and then definitely reach out if they have any questions for sure.
Brilliant. Well, top man, thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you for your time, man.
Cheers, Ruud.
Bye-bye.
Bye.